Okay, thank you very much for everybody for joining. We'll be getting going now with the discussing about Appendix WP and why we need to do it and worry about it for the LO300. Just a reminder that this is being recorded and your continued participation indicates your permission to be recorded. The other thing is my get out of jail free card. So if I make any errors or say something wrong, it's the notice of race and sailing instructions that take precedence. So just remember that in case I misstate something. Just some housekeeping. Thank you for joining. A recording will be posted on the LOOR YouTube channel, and a PDF version of the presentation will be posted on the LOOR website. We're going to have a little break throughout so people can ask questions. Here's the agenda at a high level, and while the focus is going on the waypoints, there's a number of things that impinge on it and need to be covered so people can make effective use of what we have to do for the LO300. This is based on my knowledge of Appendix WP, which is sort of a just-in-time learning, so I might not know everything. So this is a learning experience for all, and I appreciate feedback. Okay, why do we have to do this? Well, if you think about it, the governmental navigation aids are there usually where there's a large amount of shipping or there's dangers to be avoided. So they're probably not the best places for marks for race courses. Now we get the situation where the government is discontinuing them. The little thing about the Coast Guard up in the corner, when I started creating the presentation, was a proposal from the U.S. Coast Guard to remove the 350 navigation buoys in the Northeast waters. Just the Northeast, not all of the U.S., so that's quite a number. And now they've moved to officially doing it. So we're going to discuss the ins and outs of electronic type marks, because electronic navigation is becoming much more mature, so it's able to do this, or we're able to do this. We're going to talk about terminology because it matters from both a general point of view and a definition of the racing rules of sailing. Here's the colloquial buzzwords. Well, everybody talks about GPS. That was the original one from the US government. Now, for reasons that may be obvious or not obvious, a lot of countries in the world decided that they didn't want to rely on the US, so they created their own equivalent to GPS. So the generic term now is Global Navigation Satellite System. There's the one from China, EU, Russia, and the US. And you can get handheld ones that will pick up all of them. The other thing that was introduced in North America was worldwide augmentation system, which would improve the accuracy of the GPS. Now, the generic term is satellite-based augmentation systems, SBAS. So if you go to something like the Garmin 79S handheld receiver, you won't find in the manual WAAS, you'll find SBAS, and you can turn it on for, I think, whichever global navigation satellite systems you've turned on for that particular receiver. So you may spend a lot of time trying to find something if you look for GPS without realizing that you need to look for GNSS or the equivalent. So that's why, just a mention of that the terms are in North America tend to be that, but they're really much broader than that. Now, in the racing rules of sailing, definitions are defined as part of the rules, and they're used in italics throughout the rule book. And they're specific to that definition when used in the rules, not general or other usage. So you might help yourself in a protest hearing if you use the definitions in the context of the racing rules of sailing and not something more generic. One of the examples, and I won't go into the full definition, is finish. When you say you finished the race, it sounds like you finished the race, you completed the race, etc., etc. Except if you read the definition of finish in the rule book, it really talks about the technique that you need to follow to cross the finish line. It has nothing to do whether you sailed the course properly or not. They're covered by other rules. So you could technically finish the race, but not complete the race. So that's one of the subtleties you have to watch out for in the rules about the definitions that you have to, they may not be what people generally think the term means. So this is the rule book that we're all familiar with or hate or whatever. So everything is in the rule book, correct? Everybody agree with that? Right. Okay. So I won't go through the definition of a rule, just the important part that what's in red are not in the rule books, usually available online somewhere, but they are still rules. And it was courtesy of the past president of ISAF, Paul Henderson from RCYC, back in the 90s, that insisted that all the documents that ISAF produced be put on the website free. So that's why you can download the rule book free from ISAF, from the World Sailing, etc., and get all the other material that they produce that's in red. But they are still part of the rules, but you won't find them in the rule book. Now, we won't go into a lot of detail, but there's restrictions on what the race committee or the organization authority can do. Like, in other words, we can't change the definitions in the notice of race or the sailing instructions, or we can change rules of part 2. However, World Sailing, being the author of the rules, can sort of do what they want and have created appendix test rules and experimental rules. Just an example is there on here. So there's where we're getting the Appendix WP from. It's not in the rule book, but it's there. So LOOR uses several of them. We've used test rule DR21-1. What it means is that instead of a boat being over early and not returning properly in certain circumstances and therefore receiving an OCS, we can assess a time penalty. Because we thought it was kind of sort of not nice if you sailed the 300 nautical miles. Oh yeah, you're over early, you're out tough. Now we can assess a time penalty. The other one is Appendix RV, reduced visibility. The practice used to be that between sunset and sunrise, you invoke the call regs, except they were kind of onerous and could lead to both parties being disqualified because you're required to keep a proper lookout and really keep a wide separation, which is not what you want in racing. So they created the Appendix RV, which LOOR uses between sunrise and sunset and sunrise. And then we have Appendix WP for racing around waypoints, and that's the purposes of this presentation. So we'll just take a quick break. Are there any questions so far? Okay, if not, moving right along. So where are we? Consider this situation. The green X is where the official position is. The white boat's GNSS receiver says it's there, and the black boat says there. So there's really 3 different positions. This isn't a scale, but now we have the interesting question. Who's right? Who's wrong? And who is not wrong? Anybody take a guess at the answer? Well, the one that really comes.
Both are not wrong.
That's right. That's the key. According to their device, they're at point X. So it's not their fault. Their device is reading something else. their device that you're using for navigation is saying that's where X is. So the fact that you're right, you can't assume that the other boat is wrong because their device might have been showing them that they were in the quadrant. And we'll be discussing what the quadrant is a lot later, but that's important. So the fact that you think you're at X and this boat appears not to be at X doesn't mean that they're wrong, because their equipment may be putting in there. So we get the situation of multiple valid realities. So this brings up the question, are we beginning to get into the twilight zone? So here is the guts of Appendix WP. This is out of the material from World Sailing. So they changed the definition of mark. They added the word waypoint. It just used to say an object the sailing instructions require a boat to leave on a specified side, a race committee, etc., etc. So they added the thing, an object or waypoint. So that's where the waypoint comes in, becomes a mark. Then they added a new definition. A waypoint is a geographic position on the surface of the water defined by WGS 84 latitude and longitude coordinates. We can talk about that a little later, expressed in degrees, decimal minutes. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then they added to the definition of a zone that the zone at a mark that is a waypoint may be changed in the notice of race or sailing instructions. That's a little important. We'll get to that in a moment. But here is a key thing, is that the sailing instructions have to define any waypoints in degrees, decimal minutes. Okay, so what we've done, we have changed the definition of the waypoint zone area, that the area around a mark within a distance of 200 meters of it, a boat is in the zone when any part of her hull is in the zone. So if you look at Rule 18, it's usually 3 boat lengths, but we've increased it after the discussions with some other race organizations that use WP to make it 200 meters, which is the same as it is in Appendix RV. So that's what's there. So they're the same. So zone, think about RRS 18 in RRS Part 2. So now it's not 3 boat lengths, but it's 200 meters. Then how do you show that you've gone around the mark? The World Sailing has provided some guidance, and it's posted on the official notice boards. And it basically says that we'll have a quadrant, and we'll explain what that is, that if you have a GPS track that with a fix in that quadrant, then you've deemed to gone around the mark. This is coming up right now. So in other words, here's the point. Then we have a bearing line at 90 degrees and at 90 degrees. So if you get a fix anywhere in this quadrant, then you've deemed to go around the mark. Any questions on that? So that means you need to be having your, there's a, you can take a photograph or you can have your track. We'll discuss that a little later. But that's the thing, that's the point. As long as you get a show that you have a fix in that quadrant, then you've deemed to go around the mark. And yeah, go ahead.
The 200 meters, where does that come in? If you're 200 meters away from that quadrant, you're still okay?
No, the zone is 200 meters. Zone
Okay.
You don't have to be 200 meters away from them. It's the zone about when 2 boats are there in the zone, how you have, who's got right of way and all the rest of it.
Okay, sorry.
Normally it's 3 boat lengths, but it's now, we've increased it. So, okay. So if you get a fix anywhere in that quadrant, then that is your proof that you've gone around it. according to your device. A passing mark is the same thing. They've even in the guidance showed it through a gate. We don't have gates, so you don't have to worry about that. But the idea is always getting the bearing lines and getting a fix in them. So here we get how you can get proof. You can have it in your track on your GNSS device. You could take a photograph of the one like you do sometimes at the finish, or if it has a screen capture. But the idea is that it shows you that you have a fix within that quadrant. We're not requiring boats to turn in the proof, but if there's a hearing, you'll need to present it. In fact, then the OSR Cat 3 documents requires a GPS and SI 10.4 mandates are track recording. So this is not something you don't have to do extra. It should be in there automatically when you're following what's required. The other thing that we're doing is trying to use waypoints as few as possible, trying to make them as farther down the course, so to spread out the boats, and we're trying to keep that interior angle at 60 degrees or more so the boats aren't heading back at each other. And we'll show that in the next slide. Okay, here's the sole waypoint on the main duck course. There is none on the Scotch bonnet course. And it's down here off there, down off Prince Edward. And you're coming in, and then you go back up to the Prince Edward Odas. So you're not heading right back towards each other. So trying to keep the boats separated. Okay, so the best results from your GNSS device. GNSS devices can be very accurate and precise. However, you have to be using the latest equipment. They have to be properly configured. They have to be used correctly and understand the limitations. Some of the older ones actually only use minutes to 3 decimal places. The newer ones go to 4 decimal places. You may or may not have WAS enabled. Some of them have compasses, and you can set whether you want it to be true or magnetic. And we'll get into what format the position is displayed and data. Most of them GPS is defaulted WGS 84, which is the worldwide grid system from 84, which is what's used in North America. But some of the old charts from the Pacific Ocean use a different datum. And if you don't have the right datum to go with the right chart, you could be way off. So you have to watch that. Used correctly, the Garmin 79S that's pictured there has a waypoint averaging feature. So what it does is what lets all the satellites go around and it averages it over. However, it takes 90 minutes to do that. So to get the most accurate is you may have to sit there for 90 minutes, and which you're not going to do. We hopefully in the race, hopefully there's some wind. So there, you may have WAAS enabled, but it may not be close enough to a transmitter, so it not may be working. The other thing is the limitations. It turns out that the speed of electromagnetic waves, radio waves, light, is impacted by air humidity. And GPS is all about timing. I had a very early GPS, finished a race off Centennial Pier, the fog rolled in. So I said, oh, great, have a GPS, they'll help us get back in. It couldn't lock onto any satellites because of the fog, which didn't seem too useful. However, the newer ones are able to do that. Why not leverage YB tracking? Because they have GPS in them, etc. A couple of points. We wanted a mechanism that could work in any of our Cat 3 races, not just the ones where we have YB tracking. It's the incumbent on the people to know where they are. So YB is not there displaying the navigation to the people. So they need to be using their navigation device to say that they passed the waypoint and get that fixed. And then you need to understand how YB really works behind the scenes. Here's an example of it. What it does, it takes a sample of the GPS position every 5 minutes and uploads it every 15 minutes. So what happens do you see those two purple dots? So if the timing's right, it'll do one at the first purple dot, the second purple dot it'll take fix, and it'll draw a line between the two. So it shows that looks like the person didn't go around the mark when they did it. So there's if you're going at like 8 knots, there's a significant distance that you've traveled in the 5 minutes between the two sample points. So YB in that situation wouldn't prove that you went around because it's not sampling at the necessary rate. Yes, we could increase the sampling in YB, but there's always a trade-off. It's not using being the primary navigation system, so the racers don't know where they are from YB. It increases battery drain. So like even when their YB trackers are used on the ocean races, they may be doing a sample every hour or something like that because they don't want to drain their batteries. We try to make sure all the batteries are fully charged before they go out, but sometimes batteries are a little unpredictable and run down faster than the other ones. And on the 600 one time, we had to run out and give the 600 boats a new YB tracker to finish the 600 because their batteries were going down. And of course, it doesn't handle the races that we don't have YB tracking. So we'll take a quick break. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so there's a couple of things that we want to cover that are related and implications. Here we talked about displaying your position. There are three standards for doing it. The old-fashioned way is degrees, minutes, and seconds. And the government slight lists tend to do that. Then when GNS came out, it was degrees, minutes, and decimal minutes. And there's 2 abbreviations for that, which really helps. And then with Google Maps and all the rest of it, you get degrees and decimal degrees. So there's an example of the same place shown at 3 different formats. So you got to make sure you got the right format or you could be really messed up. And that gets really confusing. Here's an example. The Grimsby ODAS that Ard knows well is that the Environment Canada website, every time it gets an observation, puts the buoy position. But if you don't look carefully, you don't realize it's degrees and decimal degrees. Then if you go to the lights list, it's in degrees, minutes, and seconds with a decimal second. Now, if we go back to what has to go in the sailing instructions for waypoints and the standard practice, it's decimal degrees and decimal minutes. So the 2 official government sources are one thing, and what we have to put in the sailing instructions is something else. So this is something to watch out for when you're looking at the documentation of where something is. You need to understand what format the fix is being displayed. Okay, and then there's tools on the internet that'll do the conversions for you. And of course, you can always trust everything on the internet. Then we get to significant decimals. And I learned all about this in my quantitative chemistry course way back in university. Who knew it would apply to sailboat racing? Here in the left-hand column, there is different precisions in there of things, what we're doing, okay? Or sorry, the what is the same position, but with more decimal points. And that says how more accurate or precise you're going to be. Now, when I used that program to convert them, they all came out to 43.5, which perplexed me for a while. Then I used the what on the second from the right, and then discovered one of them, when it converted to a 0 at the end, it didn't display the 0. So what this program is doing, it does it to 5 decimal places. Unless they're trailing zeros, then it ignores them. So you might not be getting the precision you want to, or you're getting more than you want. So on the right-hand side, what's underlined is the equivalent precision to what's there on the in what. So it's not till you get down to the bottom one that all the decimal points are significant. So that's the thing that what you have to watch out for when you're using to use a program to convert it. It may not be converting it to the same precision and make it implying that it's more precision than it originally posted. Any questions on that? Or it just means that you may think it should be there, but it may be off by 60 feet or something like that because of what was actually posted. The other thing where it comes into play is in scoring, and this was an actual result from the 300 this year. We had a tie uncorrected time. Racing, we take the thing to the nearest second. The time corrected factor usually has up to 4 decimal points. So if you do the conversion, you're going to get a decimal points in the second. So if you had 2 boats, corrected time was 2 hours, 30 minutes, 10 seconds, and 003 or 004. It should be one scored first and the other one scored second, or do you round up to the nearest second and say they're tied? So what's this practice in the rule is you do it to the nearest second. So that's why you get these 2 boats tied on corrected time. Again, some of the old scoring programs just gave you all the decimal points and then sorted them in numerical order without taking the, what does that really mean into account. So this is some other key rules. Appendix RV. There it replaced the part 2 between sunset and sunrise, and they're available on the World Sailing website and from the LOOR website. The previous practices was to use the call regs during darkness, but they were a little onerous for racing because they're designed to keep vessels apart, and that's not what you're doing in racing. But so you need to read these because this is what applies when between sunset and sunrise. So here's a question. How many penalty turns are you required to do to exonerate hitting a mark in LOOR races?
360. Well, 1 turn.
No. None. Because the alternate penalty rule is in effect. Okay, the reason for this is that you don't want people doing turns in the middle of the night unexpectedly. So if to exonerate yourself, you can take the scoring penalty, which means you're supposed to fly a yellow flag and notify the race committee. And we have changed the penalty instead of places to 5 minutes on elapsed time, because we figured that's more reasonable than knocking you down a couple of places, which means you could never get first place if you ever took an alternate penalty. But if you were able to do your turns and sailed well enough, you could work your way back into first place. So the turns don't work. They don't exonerate yourself in LOOR races because the alternate penalty rule is in effect. Other considerations. Here's an example of electronic navigation at its worst. That is an example of Vesta wind sitting on a shoal in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Nothing around it for miles. Those people are standing on the shoal at low water. They were doing, if you want to, you can look it up, but basically they were using electronic navigation and didn't understand that on the old-fashioned chart, shoals and things like that were exaggerated out of proportion to show up on the chart, but on the electronic chart, they're there to scale. So if you've got the one that's showing the widest view of the Indian Ocean, it didn't show up. So you have to understand what you're doing when you're starting to use all these fancy electronic devices, because it may not be what you're thinking you're doing. And this is important because more and more people are getting these devices, electronic charts, etc. And you need to understand what they're doing and their limitations. Well, I'm a member of Queen City Yacht Club on Toronto Islands, and when things came out about driving and mapping, I put in my home address and the address of the yacht club on Toronto Island. It merely took me down the Gardner, down Cherry to Unwin, and directly across the Eastern Gap, which didn't work too well. Now they don't do it, but you need to do a sanity check of the information that you're getting from devices. Is this really making sense? So there's some good, here's some websites where you get good information. Might be preaching to the choir here, but here's where people, if they want to take courses on navigation, can and learn about it. Like there's courses on GPS, etc., or GNSS should be, and how to use the electronic charts. Just mentioned that for anybody interested, you can still register. And here are the links to the information. And does anybody have any questions about what we've covered? Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for joining. And see you on the water. And
Thanks, that was useful.
yeah. And if you have any questions that come up, you can always send them to us and we'll try to answer them.
Okay. Thank you, Graham.
Okay?
Very
Thank
useful.
you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah.